For many centuries, London was a dangerous place. It was a magnet for the very worst kind of people. Jack the Ripper dominated the headlines. But he wasn't the only killer around. Murder was afoot. The fear of death was everywhere. But police had their work cut out to track the culprits down. In this series, we'll be investigating some of the country's most notorious and intriguing crimes.
Female dependent.
Sexual intrigue, vicious murder, as well as the latest technology, fed the nation's insatiable desire for gruesome stories of London's dark side. Brighton in summer is a popular spot and has been so for centuries. In the Georgian era, it was a stylish retreat of the rich and famous. Later in the 19th century, the advance of the railways opened up the seaside town. People from all walks of life journeyed there for its fresh air and long sunny days. By the 1930s, Brighton was an easy and popular day trip from London. But if that modern train line brought tourists to the town, it also brought those with a darker purpose.
Brighton's always been a rather raffish place, even since the days of the Prince Regent and general naughtiness in the early 19th century. The elegant terraces, expensive hotels, rich people, and yet behind it there's a substratum of prostitution and crime. Brighton was a very thrusting, energetic sort of town. It was a bit, I suppose, like a comprehensive school, with the wealthy at one end, the very wealthy, and the low life at the other end. You know, it had such a mixed population, such a cosmopolitan place.
It was exciting and vibrant, a little bit edgy and a little bit violent at times, and so I think it attracted people there that believed that things were going to happen. It was close enough to London to attract some of the worst elements of criminals to go down there to see what they could do at Brighton.
The criminal underworld thrived off the close connections with London. Razor-wielding gangs fought for supremacy. The town was plagued by racketeering and extortion, gambling and prostitution. But murder was the crime that the town became most famous for. It was murder that in this decade gave Brighton its unwanted nickname, Queen of the Slaughtering Places.
June 1934 was a very, very hot month, and people flocked down to Brighton in huge numbers, and everybody seemed to be enjoying themselves at that time, except in the railway station at Brighton.
A station porter had alerted the police to a foul-smelling trunk, the contents of which would shock the nation. Inside the trunk, wrapped in layers of cheap brown paper and packed around with cotton wool, was a parcel. It was secured with a long length of sash cord. The police untied it and opened it. Inside was the dismembered torso of a young woman. Recognizing the severity of the crime, the Chief Constable of Brighton Police requested assistance from London.
It was usual at that time for provincial forces to call in the Yard because the Yard had the expertise and the resources to help in inquiries. It should also be added that liaison between various police forces wasn't very good at that time, so it's a good idea to have officers down from London who might also know likely lads or lasses who were involved in crime in Brighton.
That evening, just hours after the discovery of the torso, Chief Inspector Robert Donaldson and Detective Sergeant Edward Sorrell arrived in Brighton to take charge of the investigation.
The trunk was left at the station on the 6th of June, Derby Day, racing fans. According to the tag number, staff estimate it was deposited there between 6 and 7 p.m. Obviously, we're going to be questioning everyone who was on duty at that time.
More than 90 pieces of luggage were left in the cloakroom on that day alone, gentlemen. It will be difficult for staff to remember individuals, so we will have to jog their memories.
The trunk was a common make, but it was new. It would also have been heavy. It may have taken 2 people to carry, so an employee, a porter, might have even helped the suspect with it.
This will not be an easy case. As it stands, we do not have much to work with, but if we are thorough, and if we are precise, gentlemen, I do believe we will apprehend those responsible for this.
Who was the killer? And who was the victim? And where was the rest of her? There were few clues. There were no identifying marks on the body and no fingerprints on the suitcase. The one lead police had was a fragment of handwriting found on the paper wrapped around the body. A single word, written in blue pencil, could just be made out. Ford.
So, they found the legs.
As in Brighton, staff at King's Cross Station in London had become alarmed by a rancid smell in the luggage room. Finally, on the evening of the 18th of June, they discovered the source of the stench. A brown trunk. It had been left there on the 7th of June, one day after the first trunk had been deposited in Brighton. Inside this second case, neatly wrapped in oil-soaked paper, were the rotting legs and feet of a young woman. Once again, station staff had no clear memory or record of who had left the trunk, and its contents offered few clues either. An alert was sent out to stations across the country. Left luggage rooms were searched up and down the land, but there was no sign of the body's head or arms anywhere.
People would send trunks full of luggage on the railways quite regularly. So there were a lot of these trunks about, and it seemed at one stage as though there were an awful lot of trunks with dead bodies inside them.
Luckily, most murderers are amateurs at it, and most of them don't seem to realise how difficult it is to dispose of a body. So you've got to find somewhere to put it, or cut it up, or do something of that sort. So yes, trunks, murder, suitcases, you name it. They seem to come up fairly regularly.
The torso and legs were examined by Home Office pathologist Sir Bernard Spilsbury. By this time, Spilsbury was a legend. His evidence had proved decisive in securing the convictions of Dr. Crippen in 1910 and the brides in the Bath murderer George Smith in 1915. 2 decades later, he was still the most renowned and respected pathologist in the country.
Sir Bernard's report, sir. King's Cross legs are a match.
she was pregnant.
4 to 5 months. Could be why she was killed.
Perhaps so.
Otherwise, she was in good health. No natural cause of death detected.
The condition of the feet and toenails suggests she was particular in matters of personal hygiene.
I thought she could have been a dancer, sir.
Have you ever seen a dancer's feet, Sergeant?
No.
Well, they aren't pretty.
When have you seen a dancer's feet, sir?
Dismemberment occurred several hours at least after death. The press are going to love this.
Donaldson was right. Almost 50 representatives of local and national newspapers descended on Brighton. They loitered outside the police station day and night, eager for any scrap of information they could sensationalize for their readers. But such scraps were thin on the ground. The dead woman's identity was still unknown. How she died and where was another mystery. As yet, Inspector Donaldson was no closer to finding answers or the killer. Little did he know, however, that his whole investigation was about to be turned on its head. The case, which would become known as the Brighton Trunk Murders, was quickly gaining notoriety. But the police investigation had few clues to go on. With no way to identify the victim or killer, the police turned to the public. They did not disappoint. Donaldson and his team were soon overwhelmed by an avalanche of tip-offs. A card index with 13 different categories was needed just to cope. In New Kent Road, London, Annie Watts read the news reports with mounting alarm. She had not seen her 42-year-old daughter Violet in 3 years and feared the worst. Hers was but one tip among thousands. 800 missing women had been reported to the police. Donaldson and his team had to check every one. But among the 70 who were not found was Mrs. Watts' daughter. Born in 1891, Violet was a music hall artist. But singing and dancing in cheap venues for pennies was a difficult way to make a living. Often she relied on prostitution to get by.
Violet Saunders was from a family of 9. She eventually became part of a song and dance duo. She didn't exactly play the Palladium, it was something more like the Balham Hippodrome. Her partnership broke up in 27. She took up with another man under the title of K&K. That lasted until the early 30s, but then they parted company, partly, I think, because she'd taken to the bottle a bit, and also perhaps was experimenting with drugs.
By 1933, she was going by the stage name of Violet Kay. It was in this year that she met a man calling himself Tony Mancini. He was more than a decade younger than her, but he had a quick smile and keen charms. In September that year, she asked him to come to Brighton with her. Mancini agreed.
She conceived a passion for Mancini, and she wanted him to move away from the violence of London down to Brighton. And for some months, Mancini lived off her earnings. They had a basement flat in Park Crescent, and when customers came calling, Mancini would go away and then return later on and pick up the money from Violet, which she was happy to give him. But she was also incredibly jealous.
Violet was too old to be the dead woman found at the train stations, but police were in no position to dismiss a lead. Weeks had passed, and they were no closer to finding the killer. When word reached them that Mancini had been witnessed disposing of women's clothing, Inspector Donaldson decided to bring him in.
Mancini. That's an Italian name, isn't it?
It is, sir, yes.
I don't do much of an accent. Where was it you were born, Mr. Mancini?
London. I'm a London boy. They all know me up there.
Sergeant Sorrell and I are from the Metropolitan Police. Would we know you?
Not Brighton boys, then.
Scotland Yard.
Should have known they'd send the professionals for me.
Look, I'll tell you the truth. That's why you're here.
It's just a name. Mancini. I made it up.
Tony Mancini is not your name.
Cecil England. Louis. Cecil Louis England. You get all that?
Cecil Louis England.
Write down I'm telling the truth as well.
Why Mancini?
Now, geezer can call himself what he wants, can't he?
That rather depends on the reason.
Never liked Cecil.
Tony Mancini, his real name was Cecil England, but he also used the surname Lothair.
He took the name Tony Mancini because there was a girl he knew, and she liked the men to be Italian, and so Mancini thought this was a great name, so he became Tony Mancini. He also was known as Tony English and Hyman Gold.
He was born on the 7th of January 1908 in New Cross, a working-class district of southeast London. Aged 18, he joined the Royal Air Force and served for 2 years before leaving with the rank of aircraftman first class.
Tony Mancini was a low-level criminal. He was in the Air Force for 2 years. He had either deserted or he'd been invited to leave the service. And he'd been a bit of a fairground boxer, but in the main he wasn't doing much work.
Just 20, he headed back to London. There he found occasional work as a barman in Knightsbridge or a hawker in the West End. But he was always short of money. In 1930, he was convicted for theft.
He was convicted of stealing silver and then of loitering with intent to commit a felony, and eventually of stealing from a dwelling house, for which he got 6 months. He'd had 3 months for the loitering. He was released around about 1932 and made his way to the West End.
On his release, he began work at a club near Leicester Square in the heart of London. He told co-workers there his name was Tony Mancini. It was at this club that he met Violet Kay.
Are you acquainted with a woman named Violet Kay?
You mean, do I know her?
Yes.
I know her, sir. I did. She were my missus till she left.
Where did she go?
I come home from work and find this letter saying she's leaving, going off with some other geezer, someone who can keep her better.
What was his name?
I didn't see it coming. Her leaving me. You know, I used to play for Queen's Park Rangers.
What was her new man's name?
Well, she didn't say. From what I've heard since, it was this Moore geezer. He had a bookmaker's office on Gloucester Road. Don't know where he is now.
When was this?
May?
When in May?
Well, I've been at the Skylark about a week, so 14th, something like that. Yeah, I come home from work and she were gone. Ungrateful cat.
Mr. Mancini.
England. Cecil Louis.
Mr. England. Can you tell us your whereabouts on Wednesday the 6th of June this year?
It was Derby Day.
Yeah. I remember. Windsor lad. Had a nice little wager on him.
6th of June, where were you?
Work. Yeah. All day.
Until what time?
9:30. We're open pretty late.
And on the 7th?
Same. I work every day. You can ask them, they all know me in there.
Police kept watch as Mancini returned to the seaside cafe where he worked. He seemed unalarmed. After an afternoon serving food and drink to customers, he joined friends at a local dance hall. Donaldson called off the surveillance. It was a mistake. The next morning, the suspect was not to be found at his lodgings in Kemp Street, nor anywhere else in Brighton. Mancini had vanished. Brighton, 1934. Weeks had passed since the first discovery of the body parts in the trunk. But investigators, led by Inspector Robert Donaldson of the Metropolitan Police, were no closer to solving the crime. As an eager press and public waited on news, observers were struck by the similarities between the case and another crime from over a century before. For this was not the first trunk murder in Brighton's history. In 1831, the pregnant Celia Bashford was murdered by her husband, John Holloway. He was a violent bigamist who could not afford another child. He conspired with his second wife, Anne, to murder Celia. Holloway lured her to a house near the beach and strangled her with a rope. Together, John and Anne dismembered the body.
The first thing they did was to cut her arms off, her legs, and her head. And they were taken separately by wheelbarrow down to where Holloway was staying in Margaret Street and pushed them down the Privy. The next day, they decided that they had to get rid of the rest of the body, this dismembered corpse. The trunk was put into a trunk, in effect. Rather like Mancini, he hired a wheelbarrow to take her to another spot, which was called Lover's Lane, and buried it in a shallow grave with items of clothing, which in fact was his undoing.
Two men were walking through a local park and they saw a piece of red cloth on the ground, and one of them poked it with a stick, and they found body parts. A lot of people turned up to see what was going on. We don't know what the identification was, but one of the women in the crowd said, "That's my sister."
That, together with gossip, because Brighton was a very small place in those days, pointed the finger at John Holloway, who was arrested. He told various stories, which none of which were true, and he was duly convicted.
Holloway's wife, Anne, soon confessed. He was tried and found guilty. He hanged on the 21st of December, 1831. There was no such easy resolution for police in 1934, however. Almost a month had passed since the beginning of the investigation, but the victim found in the luggage remained nameless, as did her killer. One suspect had been identified, a Londoner who went by the name of Tony Mancini. He had aroused suspicion by giving away women's clothing. His girlfriend Violet had not been seen for weeks. It seemed promising, but police were soon disappointed. Their inquiry showed that Violet was too old to be the woman in the luggage, and Mancini had been at work on the days the trunks were deposited at Brighton and London. It was another dead end. On the morning of the 16th of July, however, a man came into Brighton Police Station with new information. His name was George Barnard. He was Mancini's landlord. He told police that Mancini had suddenly vanished.
This is Donaldson. Don't tell me, Sergeant, he's done a runner. What?
Donaldson soon learned that Mancini had due cause to disappear. He had left behind many of his belongings, and among them was a large black trunk.
Mr. Mancini?
Inside, he could see evidence of a skull and head hair, and he thought he'd found the missing skull of the remains that were found at Brighton Station and King's Cross. But looking a little more deeply at the situation, realised, of course, that it was a whole body.
And the mothballs that he'd put around the corpse had no effect. The stench was absolutely awful.
When they actually found the trunk with Violet Kay's body in it, it was of course a great surprise to the police, because they all of a sudden had too many legs for it not to be two bodies. They did have some difficulty working out the identities.
Sergeant?
At 11:40 this morning, Sergeant Scales and I attended the lodgings of Cecil Luke.
Just call him Mancini.
Mancini was absent, believed absconded. In the flat, we found a large black trunk. It contained the body of a woman. We believe this to be Violet Kay, one of the women we've been tracing. A post-mortem will be carried out this evening by Sir Bernard Spilsbury, but it was obvious that the body had been in the trunk for some weeks.
At 5 p.m. that evening, Sir Bernard Spilsbury examined the body of Violet Kay at Brighton Mortuary. The still-dressed body was damp with decay, rotting green, red and brown. It had been in the trunk for weeks. Despite this advanced state of decomposition, Spilsbury was still able to tell police that Violet had been killed by a powerful blow to the side of her head. Alerts were sent out to police forces across the country. Mancini had to be found.
Spilsbury found the body of Violet not unnaturally badly decomposed after all these weeks, but he was able to detect a depressed fracture above her right ear, which he thought was the primary cause of death.
A blow to the head had dislodged a small piece of skull. Now, when Violet's body was found, there had been a hammer and some coal. This could quite possibly have caused the wound.
Spilsbury also found, and his evidence is controversial here, that bruising to the head would have been inflicted 2 or 3 minutes before death.
Bernard Spilsbury said that it was certainly a murder and it couldn't have been an accident. And so the police were on the lookout for Mancini.
So, statements from the men who were with Mancini last night.
Right. What did they have to say?
They were with Mancini in the club after our men...
After I called them off, yes.
They accompanied Mancini to his lodgings in Kemp Street. Noticed the smell, of course. Then they all went for breakfast. They described Mancini as carefree.
Well, at least somebody is. Anything else?
After breakfast, they went to Preston Park Station, where Mancini boarded the 7 a.m. train to London Victoria.
Really? Victoria?
I've passed it on to the yard.
Good work, Sergeant. They'll find him.
Apparently, his last words to his friends were, "I'll be famous soon."
I'll be famous soon. Well, Sergeant, it's not disappointing.
But if Mancini had killed Violet, then what was his motive? Their relationship was a stormy one. Mancini was a womanizer, and Violet was easily provoked. Witnesses remembered a confrontation between the pair in early May. Violet was angry at Mancini for flirting with a young waitress at the cafe where he worked. Violet was never seen there again, nor was she seen by anyone else. On the 11th of May, Violet's sister in London received a poorly spelt telegram. It claimed to be from Violet. She was going away, it said. Her sister heard nothing more. Weeks later, Mancini was heard to boast of beating his girlfriend from pillar to post with a hammer.
The message said, "Gone away, gone abroad, sailing today, will write." The police got the original note, which had been handed in at the post office, and this matched up to Mancini's handwriting on the menus that he'd written at the Skylark Cafe.
And then he said, about women, you know, there's only one way to treat them. Don't use your fists, because you only hurt yourself. Use a hammer, as I did, and slosh them with it. A very strange thing to say for a man who hasn't been accused of murder, or even to be saying that kind of thing in case he shouldn't. But Mancini is a fairly unintelligent man, a man not capable of planning.
Sure enough, during searches at the flat where Mancini and Violet had lived, police found a charred metal hammerhead among the ashes of the fire. Its handle had been burned away as if someone had tried to destroy it. Whoever that somebody was seemed to do enough, for forensic techniques were rudimentary in the 1930s, and the burning of the hammer had removed anything which could link it to the murder. Despite all evidence being circumstantial, everything was pointing to Mancini. Donaldson and his team needed a confession, but in order to obtain one, they needed to track down the elusive Mancini. Having left his home in Brighton, Tony Mancini had fled to London, leaving behind most of his belongings, including a large black trunk containing the rotting body of his girlfriend, Violet Kay. The police were working around the clock to find him, and early on the 17th of July, Donaldson received the news he'd been waiting for. Mancini had been found and arrested. He had enjoyed his 2 days of freedom. He'd gone drinking with friends and even took the time to seduce a 17-year-old girl. Now, however, Mancini faced a far less pleasant encounter.
You say she was already dead when you found her?
Yeah. She was laying on the bed. Blood all over the sheets and everywhere.
Why did you not call the police?
I don't know. I was frightened. I couldn't prove I didn't do it, and I knew you'd blame me.
And that's when you bought the trunk?
Yeah.
And decided to take her with you when you moved to Kemp Street? You have no idea who might have killed her?
As God is my judge. I don't know. Well, she was a prostitute, you see. There was always men coming up to the house, all the hours. You ask my landlord, he'll tell you.
You are suggesting that one of these men, her clients, killed her?
Well, you hear about it, don't you? All I know is that I'm innocent. Except the fact I kept the body. I admit that. I should have gone to the police when I found her, but that's all I'd done. I never killed her.
They were sure of Mancini's guilt, but had no solid proof, and it was clear that a confession was out of the question. Despite this, they were convinced they had enough to satisfy a jury in a court of law.
A trunk containing a woman's body was found in a room which you occupied at 52 Kemp Street, Brighton.
As a result of our inquiries, you are now to be charged with her murder. You are not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so. But anything you do say will be taken down in writing and may be given in evidence. Is that understood?
I'll say it again. I'm not guilty.
Mancini's trial began at 10:30 on the 11th of December 1934. As always with such notorious cases, a large crowd had gathered outside the courthouse. A ballot was required to distribute the tickets for the public gallery. Following Mancini's plea of not guilty, the prosecution began. They told the jury that Mancini had killed Violet Kay, that he had stuffed her body, first into a cupboard and then a trunk, which he transported across Brighton to new accommodation. Suspicions raised by the smell and strange liquid seeping from the trunk were dismissed by Mancini until his police interview and flight from justice. The esteemed K.C. Norman Burkitt was the defense counsel, but even with his experience, he had his work cut out with Mancini.
When Mancini went to court, he was the villain. He was turned into an absolute monster. People booed and shouted and hissed. He was quite a loathsome creature. But Violet was characterized as a drunk, drug addict. She was a prostitute. That was her reputation, such as it was completely shredded.
The defence were very clever in making things more complicated than they needed being, and they did represent Violet Kay to have been jealous of an affair that Mancini might have been having with another waitress.
What Burkitt did very cleverly was to seed in the idea that she could have fallen down the steps into the area outside the basement flat at Park Crescent, had her fractured skull there, got up, tottered into the flat, and eventually undressed and lay down on the bed and died. It sounds, actually, on the face of it, a slightly far-fetched theory, but the way in which it was presented was highly professional, highly competent.
If he hadn't done the murder, all his offence was that he concealed the body. And he'd explained that away to the court by saying, because of his past criminal record, that would have told against him had he admitted to finding the body, and so he concealed the body for that reason. That, it was argued, was his main defence.
Unusually for trials like this, Mancini was called as a witness. It was a gamble. All eyes were on Mancini, but the slick Londoner thrived under the pressure.
Mancini, despite his rather villainous appearance, scarred face and all the rest of it, was actually rather a good witness. The reporter had noted that he was relatively well-spoken, seemed reasonably intelligent, and he seemed to put on rather a good act. The jury certainly were taken in by it. So what, in fact, Mancini was saying was, I'm a man who's got previous convictions, I wouldn't get a fair deal from the police, I know I was acting as a pimp for this woman, I shouldn't have been doing it, but I did it, I'm telling it as it is, and the jury took it.
To the astonishment of the country, they cleared Mancini of murder. He was released at once.
The trial was an extraordinary triumph for the defence. It's a textbook example for young lawyers in how to conduct a defence when all circumstances seem to be riding against you.
Everybody, it seems, thought Mancini had committed a murder, and Mancini had to be smuggled out of the back of the court. And so he was free.
He clearly did love the limelight, and he was a good witness on his own behalf. There's no doubt about that at all. He could attune his message to the circumstances.
Mancini escaped the noose. But what of the original murder? What of the woman found in pieces at Brighton and London? That investigation had continued. A porter at London Bridge Station recalled helping a man travelling to Brighton with a heavy suitcase. It was the 6th of June, the day before the first trunk was left at the station there. The porter remembered the contents of the case shifting with a dull thud as he lifted it. Somehow, it reminded him of meat. The unknown passenger had travelled from Dartford, the porter believed. But despite an exhaustive search there, police could not trace him. A woman then came forward on the 30th of July, 1934. She claimed that the blue writing found on the scrap of packing paper in the first trunk was hers. She worked for a confectionery company in Finsbury Park, London. Sometimes they received faulty stock, which they sent back to the manufacturers. It was this woman's job to wrap up the goods and dispatch them. Using a blue pencil, she would write the address, Meltis Company, Bedford. Once those faulty goods reached Bedford, however, the packing paper was shredded and reused in parcels sent to depots all across the country. Once again, the trail went cold. The killer of the young woman found in pieces at Brighton and King's Cross was never to be found, nor was her identity ever established. Her story remains unknown. The killer of Violet Kay, however, was eventually confirmed. In November 1976, Tony Mancini gave an interview to the News of the World. Finally, after more than 4 decades, the truth emerged. Mancini told the newspaper he had killed Violet. He'd thrown a hammer at her during one of their frequent arguments. Panicking, he'd then hidden the body and lied about Violet's whereabouts. Despite this confession, there was still no justice for Violet. The law said that a man tried and cleared of a crime could not face a jury again for the same offense. Mancini lived to an old age. Brighton would never forget that summer, however, when it was the murder capital of England, the queen of all slaughtering places. For many centuries, London was a dangerous place. It was a magnet for the very worst kind of people. Jack the Ripper dominated the headlines, but he wasn't the only killer around. Murder was afoot. The fear of death was everywhere. But police had their work cut out to track the culprits down. In this series, we'll be investigating some of the country's most notorious and intriguing crimes.
Female defendant.
Sexual intrigue, vicious murder, as well as the latest technology, fed the nation's insatiable desire for gruesome stories of London's dark side. morning of the 13th of July, 1955, Ruth Ellis was readied for execution in the condemned cell at Holloway Prison. She dressed in her own clothes, ate a small breakfast under the supervision of her female guards, and counted down the few minutes remaining before 9 a.m.
There was outrage at the execution. There were a lot of persons who didn't agree with it.
Thousands of people signed a petition asking and begging for Ruth Ellis to be reprieved.
There were lots of people who wrote personally to the Home Secretary expressing their feelings about the case.
The judge himself wrote to the Home Secretary saying that he should consider giving a reprieve.
The public, generally speaking, did not like to see women being executed.
There were some people who thought she got what she deserved and that she was a cold-blooded killer.
Ruth Ellis was at the forefront of public consciousness, and petitions to halt her execution had been organized by passionate members of the public. They took it upon themselves to gain as many signatures as possible in the hope that the Home Secretary would grant a reprieve. Many were still out on the morning of the execution, tirelessly collecting signatures. For in their eyes, the justice system which had served the country for centuries was not fit for this modern era.
Hello, sir. Would you like to sign this petition? Hello. Would you like to sign this petition? It's for Ruth Ellis. Hello, sir. Sign the petition for Ruth Ellis. Hello. Would you like to sign this petition? Hello, sir. Would you like to sign this petition? It's against the hanging of Ruth Ellis. Hello ladies, did you know that Ruth Ellis actually had a 10-year-old boy? Hello sir, sign the petition for Ruth Ellis.
Ticket please sir.
I do apologise, I've only just bought it.
That's quite alright, sir. We're running late anyway.
Oh, really?
Signal failure. We may be here for some time, sir.
Ah. Well. I never put it in there.
Always losing things in pockets myself. Thank you, sir.
It's one of those mornings for all of us, it seems.
At least we know someone's having a worse day. Tickets, please.
Hello, Mum. Are you against hanging? Hello, sir. Sign the petition for Ruth Ellis. Sign the petition.
Sorry?
The petition for Ruth Ellis.
It's a little late, isn't it? She'll be hanged in 15 minutes.
Yeah, but it's to tell the government how people feel.
Sorry.
What's been done to her is a disgrace. Tell me why you and everyone else on this train thinks it's all right to hang a 28-year-old mum.
Well, Mrs. Ellis had a fair trial, and she was convicted of murder by the jury, and we hang murderers in this country. The law couldn't be clearer.
Her son is 10 years old.
And I sympathise with him.
And yet you'd still send his mum to be hanged.
You may not like it, but the law is the law. We're all born equal under it.
Do you even know where she was born?
No, I don't. But I imagine it would be better for all concerned if she'd stayed there.
Ruth was born on the 9th of October 1926 in Rhyl, a working-class seaside town in North Wales. Ruth's mother was a Belgian refugee and her father played in the orchestras on Atlantic cruises. Hers was a traditional Catholic upbringing. But the stable family home Ruth was born into soon unraveled. Ruth's uncle was killed in a car crash in 1928, and her baby brother tragically died the following year. Her father numbed his grief with alcohol. He became a violent and abusive drunk. Unable to hold down a job, he uprooted the family again and again. Finally, in 1940, they moved to London.
These were the war years, so the move seemed somewhat surprising, but nonetheless it happened.
By 1944, he managed to get a job as a chauffeur in Southwark. He was lucky enough to get a flat that came with the job, so that's why they moved up there.
The teenage Ruth threw herself into London life. She didn't let the Blitz hold her back. She delighted in visiting cafes and dancing in nightclubs until the early hours. In 1943, she met a Canadian soldier called Claire Andrea McCallum and fell in love. She soon became pregnant, and McCallum asked her to marry him. Ruth began excited preparations for the wedding and their new life with the baby. What Ruth didn't know was that McCallum already had a wife and 3 children back home in Quebec. Soon after the war ended, with their son not yet 9 months old, she discovered the truth. Ruth was heartbroken. She swore she would never let another man hurt her like that again. But life for a single mother in post-war London was not easy. Jobs were scarce, and rationing was still brutal. Ruth could not afford to be picky. She responded to an advert for evening work as a model at the Camera Club near Bond Street. It was through the Camera Club that she met Maurice Conley. He posed as a respectable businessman, but was in fact the biggest vice boss in the city. He invited Ruth to become a hostess at one of his nightclubs.
London in those days was full of nightclubs. The pubs had a very strict closing times, and so nightclubs catered for the late night drinking clients. And of course it was also linked with the sex trade as well. There would be all sorts of types who would be visiting those clubs, so you never quite knew who you were dealing with.
Their clientele certainly included a lot of men who were very privileged, who were sort of upper middle class, upper class, and frequented these clubs as part of their leisure time and enjoyment.
The club owner, he actually encouraged it and encouraged relationships with the customers. This was a way of bringing more money. So there was a lot of money floating around.
Her duties at the club were simple. Look pretty, entertain guests, and have sex with whoever Conley told her to, including himself.
So she was a good time girl.
It was the work she could get.
There was no shop or factory that would take her.
What is it you do?
I work in insurance.
And how'd you get that job then?
Well, after leaving university, this was before the war, there was a connection I had with the firm.
Let me guess. A friend of your father's. Ruth's dad was an unemployable drunk.
I recognized that I was fortunate. But were there really no alternatives for her?
She tried to live respectfully. Even married a fella. For all the good it did her.
And that was Mr. Ellis, I presume?
Yeah. He was a drunk and all. And a dentist. Even worse.
So what became of him? Why didn't it last?
He bashed her about. She left.
By 1953, Ruth had a new name and a new daughter. Both were courtesy of a failed marriage to a drunk. It was in this year, too, that she first dyed her hair that famous platinum blonde. She was now Ruth Ellis, the woman who would grace 1,000 front pages. In August 1953, Ruth Ellis became manager of the Little Club in Knightsbridge. It was another Maurice Conley establishment. But Ruth was proud that at 26 years old, she was the youngest club manager in London. After a series of false starts and false hopes, Ruth's life finally seemed on track. The first customer through the door was a lean and handsome young man. He was an aspiring race car driver with the family money to match his looks. His name was David Blakely. Within 2 years, David would be dead, and Ruth would be awaiting execution in Holloway Prison for his murder.
There's a telephone. Inside. In case they change their minds, right?
Yeah, I'm certain there will be, yes. She seems quite reconciled to it, I read. As far as one can tell.
Said she wants to be together again.
With?
Yeah. With him.
Ruth Ellis started an affair with David Blakely, and I think initially they were actually sort of besotted with one another.
David Blakely was a young man who was from quite a privileged social background, more privileged than Ruth Ellis's background, from a higher social class, and obviously within the context of the time that would have been perceived as quite significant.
Ellis falls for him in a big, big way. Blakely moves in with her. It was a club lifestyle. It was drinks, it was parties. There's this tremendous sense of liberation and sort of, you can do anything. There was a certain freedom about. Domesticity was not something that was normally considered.
They enthusiastically fell in love with each other, but it wasn't long before they were each having affairs.
They were both jealous people. David still pursued other women, and Ruth was the center of attention at her club. But if their similarities caused arguments, so did the couple's differences. They came from different social worlds. David had no qualms in taking Ruth to bed, but he did not dare introduce her to his mother. And Ruth felt looked down upon by David's friends. For they were used to a social circle of the same class of people, and openly mocked the working class girl from North Wales.
They shouldn't have been rude to her. There's no excuse for that. But I can understand if there were suspicions. Someone like him with someone like...
What? Someone like me?
They came from very different backgrounds.
So she was just some poor tart?
I didn't say that. But people were bound to wonder why they were together. Do you not believe there's the slightest possibility of some ulterior motive on her behalf?
You think she was just after his money?
Well, is it so far-fetched?
What about Desmond Cousin?
Oh, the other chap.
He was rich, he wanted to marry her. So, why didn't she just go off with him if that was what she wanted?
Ruth had, in fact, met Desmond Cusson before Blakely. Cusson was on the fringes of the racing set who stalked the Little Club. The 30-year-old was shy, well-mannered, and utterly in love with Ruth. He longed to break her away from David and marry her himself.
Desmond Cusson was born and brought up in Leatherhead in Surrey. He was a rich, unassuming accountant, and he was a director of a firm of tobacconists.
Blakely encourages a relationship with Cusson, who was an ex-Lancaster pilot, and his family were in the cigarettes and retail distribution, so he had quite a bit of money. But although Ellis is willing to have an affair and become Cusson's mistress, she is still very much in love with Blakely.
By late 1954, Ruth and David's relationship had turned ugly. David soaked all his money and efforts into racing. He increasingly relied on Ruth for financial support. She gave him drinks at the Little Club and allowed him to stay in her flat free of charge.
I think when young women at her age found themselves in London, it was sometimes quite difficult for them to make their own way unless they had attached themselves to a respectable man who would give them a proper home.
One of the things that's perhaps worth remembering about Ruth is that because she had become a mother when she wasn't married and when she was young, that automatically, in the context of the time we're talking about, made life quite difficult for women. They did run the risk of losing their job if it was known that they'd had the child out of marriage. So there were a variety of other types of employment that they might need to engage in.
She definitely liked the glamour, and she loved the fast cars and mixing with rich people and the aristocracy. And during that time, she clearly felt that people appreciated her, and she was beginning to feel like a somebody.
This passionate affair would soon sour, as occasional acts of domestic violence by Blakely would become routine. The uglier and more abusive the relationship became, however, the harder it seemed for either to break free. They loved and hated one another. Their bitter arguments and passionate reconciliations swallowed up their whole lives. It destroyed Ruth's success at the Little Club, too. Customers were put off by the couple's constant public rows. Takings more than halved, infuriating the owner, Maurice Conley. In December 1954, Ruth lost her job and the flat that came with it. Homeless and jobless, she moved in temporarily with Desmond Cusson, but still she did not give up on David. The relationship continued, and so did the violence. Early in 1955, Ruth began French lessons in an attempt to impress David and his upper-class friends. The tutor later recalled her students' black eyes and bruised limbs. Ruth, she thought, was a woman on the verge of a breakdown.
I can't help questioning her taste in men.
Well, no argument there.
What I don't understand, though, is if it was as bad as you imply, with the violence and unpleasantness, the misery, why did she stay?
It's not as simple as that.
Could you not just leave him? Cut him off? Never see him again?
When you know something's bad, getting away from it can seem even worse. Anyway, she couldn't. He wouldn't let her. Blakely said if she left, he'd kill her. And I reckon he would as well.
It would be Ellis, however, who would end up awaiting execution for murder. Her 2 children would be left without a mother, and all the hopes and dreams she worked towards would be destroyed. The difficult life which Ruth tried to overcome would eventually catch up with her, and all she could do is sit and wait for the inevitable end. By early 1955, the alcohol-fueled affair between Ruth Ellis and David Blakely had turned violent. The relationship had cost the 28-year-old woman her job and her home. Ruth's future with David looked grim, but she could imagine no other. In February, she left the home of her friend Desmond Cusson with her 10-year-old son and moved to a small bedsit in Kensington. She hoped David would join her there. Ruth began her new life in Egerton Gardens, and Blakely would from time to time stay, but with him came the arguments and violence. In an attempt to help Ruth, Cusson lent her money to attend a modelling course in central London. But this attempt to restart her life was soon derailed. Ruth found out she was pregnant. David was the father, but it did nothing to change the course of their relationship.
She then moved in with Desmond Cusson at Goodwood Court in his flat there. And from time to time she did a bit of modelling with the Cherry Marshall School of Modelling. Not terribly successfully. I can remember reading a book by Cherry Marshall saying that whenever Ruth Ellis turned up, she'd got bruises all over her body.
During another drunken argument, David punched Ruth in the stomach. She lost the baby. The miscarriage made Ruth ill. As Easter approached, she was confined to bed with a fever and deeply depressed. At this stage, David's friends, Ant and Carol Findlater, decided to intervene. They'd always disliked Ruth and long urged David to end his romance with a lower-class girl. Now they resolved to keep the couple apart over the long Easter weekend.
At about 10 o'clock in the morning, on Good Friday, Blakely left their serviced room in Egerton Gardens, telling Ruth that he would be back later in the day. He didn't come back.
Blakely had gone out with some friends, and she thought that he was perhaps romantically involved with one of these friends, and she was unhappy about this. She actually herself spent the weekend with Desmond Cusson. They're both sort of spending time together, drinking quite heavily together.
In the early hours of Easter Sunday, she returned home to the tiny bedsit in Kensington. She sat in the darkness by her sleeping son and thought about her life, about her drunk and violent father, her drunk and violent husband, and her drunk and violent boyfriend. It was then that a new and peculiar feeling took hold of her. She realized she wanted to kill David.
Ruth spent a lot of time with Desmond Cusson, and it would seem that he was winding her up like a corkscrew.
It's in this point that he gives her a gun. He shows her how to shoot. And you've got to look at Cusson's motive for this. Is it a way of eliminating the rival and punishing the girl?
That evening on Easter Sunday, Ruth took her son home to Kensington. She tucked him up in bed before changing. She then kissed the boy goodnight, and telling him she wouldn't be long, slipped out of the flat. Her son would never see Ruth again. Ruth left her bedsit and travelled to Tanzer Road in Hampstead, where she believed Blakely would be. The Findlaters were hosting another party that night, but by 9 p.m. they were running low on cigarettes. David volunteered to visit the Magdala pub by Hampstead Heath Station and fetch some. He could buy more drink while he was there too. Another partygoer, Clive Gunnell, accompanied him. The pair left in David's car for the short drive.
She watched the house. She saw David come out with his friend Gunnell, get in a car and drive away. Now the thing is that between Tanzer Road, where she was, and the Magdala, where David was going to, it was a little bit of a drive. So she couldn't really have had any knowledge of where they were going. They could have been going anywhere. But when she walked back down the road, presumably she saw his car parked outside the Magdala.
Ruth lurked in the street, pacing up and down outside the pub, waiting for David to emerge. She didn't have to wait long. At 9:20 p.m., David and Clive exited the pub. David stepped over to his car, groping for his keys with 3 large bottles of beer clutched to his chest.
She fired 6 shots. 4 of them hit him directly and killed him. 1 of them missed. 1 of them ricocheted and hit a passerby.
Blakely starts running. She goes after him, fires again, he falls down. And then she stands over him and empties the gun into his back.
Ruth stepped away from the body and raised the gun to her temple. She could not pull the trigger. She lowered the revolver and fired the last round off into the pavement. Then she turned to Clive Gunnell and told him to call the police. Ruth's arrest was inevitable. An off-duty police constable, Alan Thompson, was sat in the corner of the Magdala pub when the shooting started. He pushed his way through the crowd of witnesses. Outside, he found Ruth Ellis standing over the body of her lover, David Blakely. The gun was still in her hand. Beer bottles lay shattered all around. The glass shone wet with beer and blood. Gently, the policeman took the gun away from Ruth. She did not resist. And at no point did she deny her involvement. On Easter Monday, Ruth was charged with David's murder. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, she told a policewoman. I will hang for this.
Was it the idea of parting from him that you couldn't bear?
She loved him. And he took everything from her. Then laughed about it with his mates.
But for all her unhappiness, which I recognise was considerable, this was no act of sudden passion.
Oh, she suffered abuse for years.
And had time to think. Which is my point. She took a gun and she followed Blakely. First to the house, then to this pub. And she waited for him there. For how long? What, 10 minutes? Longer? She chose to kill him. To stand closer than you and I are now. And empty her gun into him.
During the Easter weekend of 1955, Ruth Ellis's life had reached breaking point. Her lover, David Blakely, had disappeared with friends, and she spent the weekend drinking with her ex-lover, Desmond Cusson. She was certain that Blakely was having an affair, and fueled by jealousy and drink, she sought him out, armed with a gun provided by Cusson. She shot Blakely multiple times, and was arrested shortly after. Ruth knew her actions that fateful night would ultimately lead to her execution. Her certainty may have been misplaced. 2 decades earlier, a woman was put on trial for a similar crime. In 1932, Elvira Barney, a London socialite, was tried for the murder of her boyfriend. After a loud argument in which Elvira threatened to shoot him, he was found dead with a gunshot wound to the chest. Elvira insisted it was an accident. She was threatening suicide, she said, and her boyfriend tried to stop her. During a tussle over the weapon, the gun accidentally discharged and delivered the fatal injury. The jury believed her. She was found not guilty. Soon after the verdict, Elvira was back on the dance floor at her favorite Café de Paris in central London. "Take a good look at me," she exclaimed to the crowds. "I'm the one who shot her lover." Like Ruth, Elvira was only in her 20s. Like Ruth, she was a fixture of London nightlife. And, like Ruth, she had a tempestuous, alcohol-fueled relationship with the man killed. But unlike Ruth, Elvira was a wealthy member of the social elite. What would the court in public make of a working-class girl like Ruth? Her trial began at the Old Bailey on the 20th of June, 1955.
When she went to court, there was tremendous hostility towards her, the good time girl, the tart. And she is subjected to one of the most devastating cross-examinations ever. Prosecution counsel asked her one question. It's unique, just one question. When you stood over the body of David Blakely and fired into his body, what did you intend to do? I intended to kill him. Counsel sat down. You've got the guilty intent, you've got the physical act. You don't have to prove anything more, and that is murder.
Whether it means that she wanted to be found guilty, I think, is a difficult question to answer, but she said it was obvious that she'd intended to kill him. She said this in court. And I think it shows that she was answering very honestly. Of course, that doesn't necessarily benefit you if you're on trial for murder, but she was certainly willing to give honest answers to the questions, and some of those perhaps meant that she was then perceived, certainly in relation to the criminal justice system and the legal process, quite negatively.
I don't think she had any doubts in her mind that she had intended to kill. And my guess is that in her own mind, she was justified in killing him because of the way that she perceived that he had been treating her. So I don't think that she was in any way looking to be regarded as innocent of the act of shooting him.
By then, a fiction had been presented in the press. David as the well-educated son of privilege, led astray by the peroxide blonde charms of the social climbing lower class. David's own violence and jealousy were ignored. Ruth's defense did little to correct these misconceptions. Prosecution witnesses were barely cross-examined, and Ruth's barristers seemed squeamish about revealing David's true nature. Instead, they depicted the murder as an act of typical female hysteria.
Men don't get called hysterical.
Well, not as a rule, no. But we are perhaps less prone to the... I mean...
How was David Blakely not hysterical when he was waiting in her club all evening, picking fights with any man that even looked at her? How was George Ellis not hysterical, calling her 10 times a day after she left? What's the difference? Because they were men? Oh no, it's a woman. She must be jealous or hysterical. Women can't control themselves when they're jealous. Her defence said that. They didn't even look into that gun. Never even asked her how she got it, or who taught her how to use it. And the fact that she was hospitalised from the beatings that he gave her, she lost a baby. She was sick for weeks and the jury heard none of it.
Mrs. Ellis may have been better off with you as an advocate.
Couldn't have been worse. They were looking out for their own. They didn't want to know what decent boy Blakely was really like.
The mystery of how she obtained the freshly oiled and loaded gun was left unexplored. The prolonged physical abuse she suffered was not made clear to the jury, and there was little effort to explain her complex emotions on the night of the murder.
They'd made no effort to discredit the prosecution case and would subject the witnesses of the prosecution to a minimum of cross-examination. It's obvious that evidence about the gun was nowhere near detailed enough for any balanced jury to convict upon, and any competent lawyer would have played on the fact that the ballistics had not been carried out on the gun. Too many crucial questions were left unasked.
There's always a temptation to think, well, could her trial have been done differently? But the defence get one go at it, and they have to decide how to work their defence. But of course, that first question asked by the prosecuting counsel, why did you do it? She said, I wanted to kill him, and she did. So really, she was convicted because of what she herself had said at her trial, quite voluntarily.
After less than half an hour's deliberation, the jury found Ruth guilty. She was sentenced to death. In 1955, however, opposition to the death penalty in Britain was growing. A royal commission had already investigated the practice and concluded it offered little deterrent to crime. Prominent miscarriages of justice had shocked the nation, and even those in favour of capital punishment often hesitated at the thought of executing a woman. A campaign for clemency was launched on Ruth's behalf. Petitions urging a reprieve gained thousands of signatures around the world. But Ruth herself had no desire to escape execution. She just wanted to be with David again. The Home Secretary, too, saw no reason for the law not to take its course. There would be no reprieve.
I'm sorry.
Sign the petition?
We should be moving off very shortly, sir.
Sign it.
Is this young lady bothering you, sir?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Do you have a ticket, miss?
Yeah, it's here.
Can you step this way, please?
I have it.
You've been bothering this gentleman quite enough.
I have it.
Excuse me. It's here. It's on your clipboard.
Be more careful in future, miss. Sir?
Thank you.
Hand me the petition.
Thanks.
Ruth's death strengthened public opinion against the death penalty. Within a decade, the practice would end in Great Britain. The prejudices of sex and class that helped send Ruth to the gallows, however, would prove far more stubborn.